Commissioner Tolson won't be with us. And I don't see Commissioner Jackson, but I believe we have enough. We have 5 out of 7, so we have enough to do a quorum, if I'm not mistaken. Do I have a motion to begin the meeting? Don't all speak at once.
I move that
Motion
we
to begin.
start the meeting.
Okay, second. I think.
Second.
All right, second. All those say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. So the agenda was sent out earlier. I just want to go over it briefly. FY 2025 supplemental budget overview. That will be kind of like an overview from the wonderful Miss Kanika Bynum, as well as kind of a question and answer session. We'll have a conversation around special election costs and how that kind of ties into our work on the Fair Elections Commission. Then we'll talk a little briefly about the outreach strategy and then next steps. As a reminder, we all voted to take a month off. So this will be our last meeting until we reconvene on September 11th. And yeah, so we can go ahead and start. Ms. Warner-Wiggins, can you do a brief introduction to Ms. Bynum and then just kind of let her begin? Hi, Ms. Bynum. Can't wait to hear from you.
Sure. Ms. Bynum is the budget analyst for the Office of Finance. And through that role, she essentially will serve as the budget analyst for the Fair Election Fund. I know I've been working with her for at least 3 years. She's probably been with the Office of Management and Budget longer than that. So she's well-versed on supplemental budget process, and I'm sure can answer a lot of the questions you have. So I will hand it over to her whenever she's ready.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Thank you.
So my name's Kanika Bynum. I'm with the Office of Management and Budget, and I can do a quick overview of the supplemental process and then answer any questions that you have. I have yet to figure out the background thing, but hopefully my background's not too distracting.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
In terms of the supplemental process, so, any county agency, most of the budget is delegated to county agencies. And in your case, you're considered a special revenue fund. So that fund could seek a supplemental if, for some reason, the approved budget that we just got through in June, if that wasn't sufficient to finish up the fiscal year, then you can seek a supplemental budget. Typically, internally to county government, budget analysts are constantly communicating with the agencies to make sure that that isn't the case, or if it is the case, how we can plan around it, what's going to be needed, for what reason, how much money, is there any other way that we can avoid, doing a supplemental if we can. So internally to county government, those are kind of the conversations that we're having. In terms of who makes the decisions, so of course the director of the Office of Management and Budget is one of the stakeholders, and then the county execs team would also be a leadership team. So the CAO is a big decider in that. The DCAOs would be big deciders in that. So an agency, for the most part, it's an agency. I guess in your case, it's a commission, would really just kind of make a request. And you could do that in writing via a letter, but make a request to the Office of Management and Budget for a supplemental for this reason, for this amount. And then that will get discussed amongst the Office of Management and Budget and the CAO team. And then if it's, approved or decided for whichever amount, it then goes on legislation that is drafted about 2 to 3 times a year. And so for 2025, we'll probably do one in November or December, January. So there's when the Office of Management and Budget actually drafts the legislation to go before council, and then there's when council actually takes it up. there could be about 2 to 3 months in between there. There could be 4 months. Sometimes it tends to be a lengthy process, but so that legislation would get drafted, and then after that, it goes before council, and council will see it and kind of make decisions. They'll have discussions about it, and they'll talk about it from there. Council approves it, then it's approved and it gets loaded, and you have the extra funding. So that's the internal processing around the budget being changed from the approved budget. So if you guys had any questions about that. And then there was also, Jacqueline had brought up, if we could say, what is the estimated cost of the special election? So right now, of course, it's an estimate. Everything OMB does is an estimate. The estimate is that it will cost around 2.6 million. That's the estimate. It could, vary based on lots and lots of different factors. But so I guess if you guys have any questions, feel free.
Yeah, I think I saw Dan's hand first, and then I saw Commissioner Dan, and then I saw Commissioner Satitra. So Commissioner Dan, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for this information on. So just one question would be on the special election estimate. That would be for the August 5th, 6th, whatever that date is for, because we just have the primary, because the general is rolled in. So it's just for that one.
Right. That's the cost for this one. That's the estimated cost for this one that's coming up.
Okay. So the other question I had was, so we or the other, anytime there is a supplemental request from an agency or something, we don't get into anything like where the money comes from. That's all other people do that, right? We're just making our request with the best arguments and reasons we can do. And then we're open for, if there's questions, I presume, back and forth, but then that's handed off. So we don't get into anything about where it comes from.
Right. I mean, especially, 99.9% of this is county agencies. And, they're focused on what their job is to do, and as you could also just be focused on what your job is to do. And right, the Office of Management and Budget is the one balancing out, do we have enough money coming in to even, look at this request and future years, and we're doing the balancing of, is this a one-time ask, or is this going to be an ongoing need, and do we think that we'll have the future revenue to take on this additional ongoing need? So right, when you make your request, you don't need to worry about where the additional funding comes from, although that will be something that is taking into account, so that whether or not the ask is, that's something that OMB is thinking about and the CEX is thinking about.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Satitra?
Yeah, sorry for not turning on my video. It's 3:30 in the morning here where I am, so you probably don't want to see me. So has an appropriation been made for the special election, or is that not required, or what is the process? You said it takes several months to make this happen, or that's an undeniable need and therefore it gets done. Is that how that is?
Right. So I don't know if that funding, I'm not the budget analyst for the elections, but so I don't know if that need has already been baked into their 25 budget. If it hasn't, then they'll do a supplemental for it. I doubt that supplemental has gone down already. But there's other ways, so there might be funding in non-D that they might use until the supplemental can be put through. But I doubt that. I can ask. I doubt that supplemental has gone down for the special election need.
Yeah, just curious, because we're talking about process and I was wondering how the process is. When you said CAO team, what is that? What does CAO stand for?
The Chief Administrative Officer. So she runs kind of like the the government. She runs the like actual administration of government.
Okay. Right, I mean, I guess just for the sake of discussion among the commission members, one reason for us to ask for a supplemental budget would be to, before the next budget gets passed at the end of May of 2025, candidates may already be deciding whether to run publicly financed or not. And with so little in the budget, they might be inclined to not run publicly financed. And so if we're going to run a good public financing program, I would think we would need money in the budget before May of 2025 in order for candidates, potential candidates, to sort of feel comfortable that it makes sense for them to run publicly financed, because that then would be just a year before the primary in 26, when the next budget gets passed. So that was our reasoning or our thinking behind this process of inquiring how decisions are made for supplemental budgets. Just to kind of put that in perspective.
And thank you both for that. Are there any other questions from the commissioners? I had a couple, but I just want to make sure I allow space for the other commissioners to ask anything that they wanted to ask. Hi, Mrs. Bynum. I think I have just maybe one or two questions in regards to the timeline that Commissioner Teacher brought up. When would be the exact time that we should be submitting our request for a supplemental budget to go in essentially this year or thereabout, in context to the work of the commission and the timeline for candidates who would need to know if there was money in the pot for them to run?
I think it's better to do it sooner than later, but that doesn't mean that the supplemental legislation is going through soon. OMB probably won't even have a draft to submit to council until the end of this year. And then that probably won't even get seen by council until early of next year. But if I were you, I think I would go ahead and put that request in soon, just so that it can be a part of the mix in terms of, you know, the OMB director deciding what they're going to take on to put forward as a request.
Okay. Then my other question would be in context to that, just to make sure that we're staying within the guidelines and parameters of what we need to do. Would we be able to schedule kind of like maybe a follow-up meeting with you in context to what we would need to submit, kind of how it should look, and requests from that perspective?
Sure. Yep. We can do that.
Okay. Okay.
I will say, just along those lines, honestly, I think a letter is fine. Like just a letter saying what you want, you know, why you need it within a certain timeline because the election's coming up. And how much. I think because they really just need to know, you know, what you're asking for. I don't think there's a really particular format, but I'm happy to work with you guys on that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dan. Thank you, Mrs. Bynum. You're on mute.
Just in terms of the process, I have a question. Does the council sometimes, do they ever make requests? Like if they want to increase funding to something, how did that work? Do they put that in and then OMB brings the supplemental to them, or just seems, yeah, I'm just curious how it might work.
So if the council side wanted to supplement the budget, I almost feel like Mr. Maddox might be better to answer that, but I would imagine that they go through the same process that the county exec side goes through in terms of having to submit legislation. But I don't know if, I know he's literally just now joining. But I would imagine legislatively that the branches are similar and that there's still, you know, an administrative legislative process that needs to happen. Mr. Maddox. So there was a question about, sorry, Mr. Smith, I think your question was that if the council wanted to supplement the budget. So as in the county exec's side, if we want to supplement the approved budget, then we would put forth legislation to go before council. And so Mr. Smith is asking if the council wanted to supplement the budget. I imagine they also go through legislation, but
yes, they would have to go
imagine.
through legislation. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Maddox. Commissioner Smith, are you done? Or we can go another round. Commissioner Commissioner Diane.
Yes, I was wondering, should the commission chair or the vice chair or someone from the commission present the letter in person and give the position, because we submitted letters before and they did not go anywhere. And I don't think we want to go that same route again. So I think it would be, if it's OMB that we need to submit the letter to, but I would suggest that along with someone in person, the chair, vice chair, to present our case. Do you think that would hold a lot of weight other than just a simple letter?
What forum are you talking about? I got the question. What forum are you talking about putting forth these letters in?
Well, we were given the suggestion by Mrs. Bynum in regards to a supplemental budget request to simply draft a letter explaining how much we would need and for what purpose, and then send it to the required individuals. And then what Commissioner A. Diane Williams is saying is, because we've submitted letters in the past with no response, she's asking if it would help or strengthen our case if we could present the letter in person to the county council or something to that effect. I know when there was initial budget process, we were given the option to request to speak in front of them. And they simply said, the response that we got as a commission was simply that the time frame in regards to when we had made the request in the budget cycle didn't lend itself for us to come through. Now that we're out of the budget cycle, that shouldn't be an issue for us to request to submit the letter and ask to request to come in front of them.
Yeah, but you know, when there was a question previously about whether the council can do a supplemental, it would still go through OMB. There's no, I mean, that doesn't circumvent that process, because Office of Management and Budget still has to have a role in it. So that doesn't circumvent that.
Attorney Maddox, I didn't say anything about circumventing.
No, I'm adding that myself. What I'm saying is that when a supplemental, and I'm not an expert at this is more a Stan Early question, but I'm pretty sure that he would say any agency or any governmental entity within Prince George's County that's submitting a supplemental would still have to do it through the auspices of Office of Management and Budget, because they handle the management and budget part. Now, my question is, let me finish. The form that you want to put this forth, as far as whether whether the council will accept it or not, I can't say whether or not that would be. That would be up to Council Administrator Jenkins.
So, Attorney Maddox, I apologize. I didn't give you a rundown of where we're at in this meeting because you joined late. We've already had a conversation with Mrs. Bynum, and where she clarified the process for us and clarified how we were to move forward in regards to writing a letter with OMB, submitting it to OMB, and then it going from that perspective. Subsequently, we've already had a conversation and came to a conclusion that we would partner with OMB to create the letter and send the letter. The question that Commissioner A. Diane Williams was asking, if I'm not mistaken, was in context to getting additional feedback or support from the supplemental budget request. And so we wouldn't be talking about circumventing anyone. And I understand that because you just got on the call, you missed that whole important part prior to that question. So I hope that provides additional clarification. Additionally, even if we were to submit it through the Office of Budget and Management, it would help our cause or whatever may have you to actually do a presentation in front of the county council as we were going to do before, or we offered to do before, in context to the situation. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I apologize because I did give an overview in the chat to Commissioner Jackson. I just didn't have time to type it in for you, so that we could kind of all be on the same page and make sure that we have all the information moving forward. Commissioner Bellatron, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any response from Ms. Bynum to the query that was just raised. And if not, I'll ask my question.
Oh, sorry, I missed what the question would have, I might have missed what that question was.
That Ms. Williams raised, maybe Ms. Williams wants to restate her question.
You're on mute.
Commissioner Williams, you're on mute.
Ms. Bynum, I think you indicated that it would be best to move forward earlier now. And so I was asking about submitting the letter. And I was asking, could we have the chair or the commission give a presentation in reference to the letter at the same time? And I thought that would strengthen our case because we have submitted things in writing and somehow, you know, it didn't go through. And so this time, if time allows, I think it would be advantageous for us to present our case along with the letter. So I was asking that question.
I don't think that I'm necessarily the one to give that answer. I will say that I think it's a matter of competing priorities. I think as you've heard, it's been reported, you know, publicly that the county has been in a deficit. And so with those competing priorities, I don't think anyone doesn't understand the need for the funding. But I think it's just a matter of competing priorities. I'm not going to say that you should not try to make a presentation in person, but
we have never had the opportunity to do it, and I think this
right.
is a sufficient time to do it.
I think you can definitely seek to do that.
Okay.
And I think that it would probably be best suited with someone in the county executive's office than with Mr. Early, but I can ask about his interest in that. But it would probably be better, you know, someone on that side.
So could I ask my question now? Is that?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
I was moving to you.
Yeah, so I had a couple of questions. First, so let me ask the more detailed one first, and then I'll ask the second one. So in the context of what you just said, I mean, I think that's a very good recommendation that we start with the county executive's office. I was thinking politically because this executive and this council have revised the fair elections legislation, and the council passed it by a 10-1 vote, and the executive signed it. So at least this council and this executive are aware of what this legislation is about, since it comes from a long time ago, from 2018. And it was the county executive who put 400,000 into the budget, which did not survive the final budget process. So I think, you know, if we make a request, I think it's probably also a good idea to start again at the source and explain why it is needed. And so in that context, I appreciate your response. I wanted to get some idea, if you could tell me, what percentage of the budget is typically given as supplemental? I mean, I know you have to balance the budget, right? So is it just moving stuff that is not needed, that was budgeted but not needed in some part to some other part? Or is it actually increasing the budget itself for that year? What happens?
It can be both. So sometimes it is, oh, we budgeted too much here, let's reduce that to fund this somewhere else. Most of the time it is adding to the budget. I don't have a number of, you know, is it adding 2% to the budget? It probably varies year by year. It really just kind of depends on what's going on in the county. I mean, I think a couple of years ago, there was a lawsuit and there ended up needing to be a huge supplemental because the county had just lost a lawsuit. So it can vary. It's clearly supplementals are things that we did not anticipate. And we really try hard to anticipate as much as possible, where the county's going to be financially.
Right, so you're saying there might be more additional revenues coming in, unanticipated additional revenues, or do you think we actually we don't go into deficit, do we?
No, we do. We do,
Oh, we
and
do.
that's the current issue, and that's the issue that we foresee in the coming years, is that we will be in a deficit, and so that means that we've been using fund balance to cover our ongoing expenses, and so that's the issue this year and likely going into the coming years of the competing priorities. That last year we've spent more than we brought in. We anticipate, just looking at the numbers, to do the same this year and in the next couple of years. So that's the competing priorities that, the county executive, Mr. Early in the budget office, those are the competing priorities that everyone is rubbing up against.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm a geek, so I love to know exactly what's going on before I stick my head in somewhere and make some comments. So thanks a lot.
Sure.
This conversation is kind of sliding into portion 2, and I'm going to ask the commission, because they're kind of joint. Is everyone okay with kind of, and Mrs. Bynum, if we could have you stay on just for a few more minutes as we talk about that? I just want to is everyone okay if we slide into the special election cost conversation as well? Okay. So that being said, and if you guys have any more questions about the supplemental budget process, we can kind of still touch on that as we converse here. So the special election cost, you gave an estimate of $2.6 million.
I don't do Ginger Mill Drive.
So I'm trying to phrase this in a way that, okay. So this statement is just in context to the information that is currently out, and is not a pro or con of any of the people or candidates running. It's just a statement in context to the Fair Election Fund. We know one of the candidates running is a current sitting council member. If they were elected, would there not be another special election for that particular seat?
I believe so. I'm not an expert in the county code around elections, but I believe that, right, if a seat was vacated, then there would be a special election to fill it. But we definitely would need to confirm that with someone who's better versed in county code.
No worries. I asked the question kind of already knowing the answer to a bit of a degree. And so that would be this election. This special election is for a county-wide seat. Do you have an estimated cost of what a special election would cost for a district-specific seat? And if you don't have it right off the top, just even a ballpark.
The 2.6 number was given to me, and outside of that, I don't have any ideas or thoughts around, because like I said, I'm not the budget analyst for elections. And at least from what I've heard, just kind of being in that space, every election is very different. Every election is very different. So I'm not even sure, if someone could give you a ballpark number, because you could look at every election and they're all very different. But the 2.6 is for the special election.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking about it in context to just how much this special election cost is $2.6 million. And then a possible another special election. I know everything is different, but at the minimum it would be, and Dan, Commissioner Dan, I see you. I'll slide right over to you. At the minimum, it might be between, for a district, it could be 650,000.
I think it makes sense. Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I think it makes sense that the districts are probably less. Right. And I think it's, you think about the temporary workers that kind of come out of that. You think about just the building, the utilities and everything. I think it would be less for a district. How much less? I'm not sure, because I think some of those costs are kind of fixed, but I think it would be less than the 2.6.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I did a little research and I heard that it was a ballpark would be 300,000 to a half a million per election. So if you special election having two parts, the primary and the general would be then twice that. So you'd likely have 600,000 to a million was a ballpark that I heard from folks looking at it on the council side. But of course, those are just, as Ms. Bynum said, estimates, and that I think I heard that a week ago there was an estimate to be like 3.6 million for this, but then they said, oh, it's going to be less, and it came down to, this is helpful to hear this, 2.6.
It's
I
all
think,
an
go ahead, Mrs. Bynum.
just reiterating that it is all an estimate.
Commissioners, the teacher, do you have that number? Because I know there was a special election in 2021 for D8, for District
Right.
8.
No, I'm just saying we could probably get that number because we had
And look
it,
at
but I
that.
don't have it off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Okay. And part of the point of this conversation is because initially when we asked for the funding of the Fair Election Fund, we were told that the budget right now just doesn't have the funding. I'm sure, you know, that is what it is in the context of that conversation. However, now, you know, this is the reason why we asked about the supplemental budget and things of that nature. We're finding 2.6 million for one election with the possibility of around, I think, said between 300,000 and 600,000 per election for a primary and a general for a possible second election. And so when we talk about that in context to the request that was made for the Fair Election Fund, you know, to make sure that we could have fair election candidates, it's kind of concerning from that perspective. Commissioner Dan, I see you. I'm going to go to Commissioner Satitra, and then if you have something to add. Commissioner Satitra.
Right. So I actually would like to get Ms. Bynum's, take, informed comments on this, because we based our request for the Fair Elections Fund on the analysis that was done by OMB, the various fiscal analyses that were done for the bill, right? And this goes back to 2018, the analysis that was done then, and then the analysis that was done for the more recent 2023 bill. And each time OMB.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? I just want to clarify that was not OMB.
Okay,
who was analysis? That was the county.
The county council fiscal
county
analysis.
council.
Okay, the county council fiscal analysis around the bill. The minimum that came up in that analysis was what happens if two people run for each seat. And then it went on to larger and larger numbers of people running for each seat, which then increased the budget. So we went with the minimum, which was two people running for each seat. And that's how we came up with the number 3.65 million that it would cost for two candidates for exec and two candidates for each of the council seats, right? And so if the numbers, if the budget allocations are much smaller than that, then we are actually somewhat confused and concerned, because it means either that only one candidate will run or only a few candidates in a few districts will run, which means there's no district equality. So, there was a reason why that fiscal analysis was done and presented to the council, but it's not being followed through when we base our recommendations on the same fiscal analysis. And so it has us somewhat confused about how the folks who passed this legislation intend to run this program without the monies recommended by their own staff. Right, so that's sort of where we are. If there's any words of wisdom you can shed on that, or whether we could look at it this some other way, that would be useful.
I think that confusion is fair. I think that the analysis that was done, it looked credible to me. I don't think anyone disputed it. I think that, you know, during the budgeting process, like I said, the county is in a deficit and not a small deficit. So the next couple of years are going to be strained. So, you know, during the budgeting process, we're looking at what do we think everyone needs in order to do their jobs well. And then we look at the pot of money that we have, and then priorities are made, and all of that happens, you know, at the county executive and the council level. So, like I said, there's competing priorities. I think that the analysis was solid, but there's just competing priorities, and those elected officials are, I'm sure, you know, making the best decisions that they can.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Do you guys have any more, does any commissioners have any more questions for Mrs. Bynum? Okay. Mrs. Bynum, we're going to reach out to you and within a week or so to kind of start the process of drafting that letter, and then possibly we can meet with is it DCAO early, or
Director.
I just want to, oh, director, okay. Meeting with Director Early about kind of our requests and presentations to him, as well as once it's all created and whatnot, passing that on to a request to meet with the county executive. Mrs. Bynum, as always, I definitely appreciate your guidance, your support, and you coming on the call and clarifying everything for us. If any, one last time, does anyone have any more questions for Ms. Bynum before I let her go for the evening? All right. Good night, Ms. Bynum. Please have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think so. I think we have a plan of action. One of the things that I'm saying it to get everyone's opinion on it. I really think in the I'll phrase it a different way. I'm wondering, and you could probably flesh it out a little bit more, but I'm wondering in the letter that we request for the supplemental budget, we talk about the special election costs in context to the request for funding. I know I emailed her. I'm waiting for a response. So what are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, we should have some sort of amount we decide on at this meeting, so we can then take that letter forward, right? I mean, so, is that how we should proceed? Because we don't have another meeting until September, and we want to work on the letter, we should probably have some consensus.
We don't have another meeting until September in context to like one as a full commission, but we can work on this letter via email, and then we can have a meeting with the director early in context to some of the questions that we have. But I think it's fine if we discuss right now tentative budget request that we would submit for the supplemental budget. Yes, Commissioner Jackson.
Hi, I have a quick question. I was trying to do some research before the meeting and got busy. Isn't the special election in August?
Yes.
Okay.
The primary.
Right, the primary. So
primary.
it's not possible for anyone that's running for the council at large seat to apply for campaign funding through us, correct? Because of the short term. Okay. So the supplemental budgeting that we're asking for could fall under the general election if one of those guys wanted to get funding for that. No.
This is the supplemental. Did you want to answer, teacher? It's fine with me. The supplemental.
No, yeah, go ahead.
The supplemental budget that we're requesting is always to make sure we have enough funding for the 2026 election cycle. So this special election wasn't in the computations, if you will. And it won't be in context to that.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just pop in and say something. The program doesn't start till 26. But candidates typically will start deciding in 25 if they're going to run in 26. And when they look at the budget and they see no money in it, there is no incentive for anybody to throw their hat in and say they're going to run publicly financed. And in order to run publicly financed, you have to close your existing account, at least lock it, not take any money from it, start a new campaign account, and start collecting the qualifying contributions so that you can qualify and start getting matching funds. So with what kind of confidence would you do that when there's only 400,000 in the budget? Because you will be shortchanged. I mean, the end result will be that every candidate's qualifying monies will be cut if there's not enough money in the budget. So, I mean, if you're going to wait till June of 2025, you're going to make candidates wait till June of 2025 to decide whether or not to run publicly financed. And, I think, that might sort of undermine the whole program itself for the 2026 cycle.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, before we get to the money ask for like the supplemental, I think continue this discussion a little bit just to follow up on the last point, I think it's really a political argument and question now, really, with the council, because it's the council that took the money out. And so I think given what we just heard, it makes sense to have the supplemental is essentially a second bite at the budget apple. It's like it got rejected by the council and it's asking to go again. I doubt that the executive would want to put it forward unless they really know the council wants it and it's going to pass it. So we have to do the juggling. I think track A with the request is kind of how it gets rolling, and we want it there, but at the same time, we've got to build the interest from the council. I'm not sure that they're there yet, but we need to use these other elections and frankly, the black eye that the county has just received over this other indictment that just, we keep having these, every 8 years, 5 years, I don't know what it is. We keep having these scandals. And so personally, I would argue that we need to work on them at some point in the fall. Maybe there's we could do a briefing or to the appropriate committee of the council about this, but really try to build the interest. And then if there's we don't know how the makeup of the council is going to be by in November. So but then coming to the dollar amount again is like, what is the minimum amount we feel, and it's a lot going to be, we can't have hard evidence on all of it, but it's like, what's the minimum amount that we feel we could have a successful program in 2026? And we kind of went through that exercise back in whatever that was, January, February, or a little later, I guess that second letter we did, where we were trying to come down and realize that there's not going to be 2 people running for each of these positions. So we kind of went through that drill, and I'm kind of comfortable being in, if the fund had a total of, if it had a total of 1.6 million, I think it could be successful. I think a little bit less than that still might work. And then of course the big issue is whether you have multiple candidates running for county executive on this. And then that's what really, breaks the budget.
I see Satitra. I want to come to you. Dan, I did want to highlight something that you said about this being political. And I agree with you in context to working on the county council. But I also will say from a strategic perspective, fair elections is seen as a more phrase it a certain way. I think we would be best to work on the county council and ask to sit down with the county executive, because
Yeah,
I
both
think, yeah, I definitely think that it's
parallel.
yeah. Teacher, Commissioner teacher, you're
It
on
was
mute.
the county executive who put money in the budget, right? And therefore, I think it might be well worth sitting down with the county executive staff when we ask for a supplemental budget. The other thing is, I mean, I think we should, I'm very heartened by Ms. Bynum's analysis, which said that, in which she agreed that 2 people running for each seat, she thought was a very solid analysis. Because, I mean, just think of it from the perspective of if one person runs and a second person decides to run and then everybody gets shortchanged. I mean, that would not be a good start. So I don't think we need, given that 2.6 million is being conjured up for a special election because it has to be, I don't think we need to cut the budget for this program and say, well, what can we squeeze into it? I mean, that might be something to do in the end, but then, and the look of having to squeeze the program is pretty bad for the council and for the county as a whole. So I think we should act by using the county council's own fiscal analysis and to use 2 people for each seat. And if there's money left over, so be it. It goes, either stays in the fund or it goes back to the council, gets reallocated for the next election and so on, right? If we're going to make a case at this political juncture, it seems we might as well do it using the county council's fiscal analysis. And ask for, I mean, that's how we came up with the 2 million, which was our first ask. And nobody came back to us and said, I'm sorry, we can't do 2 million, we can only do 400 for the following reason. So we haven't had any back and forth with anybody from the executive staff or from the council staff. And so I think, let us not begin, that's my thinking right now, let us not begin to shortchange the program, especially when we've heard that a resounding vote of confidence in favor of the official fiscal analysis.
What is the dollar amount what is the dollar amount that you are suggesting to be requested for this supplemental budget letter? I think that's
we asked for 2 million, right? So we asked for 2 million and then the county executive put in 400,000. And that was removed in the final negotiations. So perhaps we should stick to our 2 billion that we asked for. I mean, it's a small fraction of the total budget.
So
yeah, I mean, that would be my recommendation because that's the one that we can most easily justify. Anything short of that, we have to juggle to say, what if a candidate doesn't run for exec? And I mean, I feel like that's something we may discuss internally in the commission, but we're going to make a public ask for a certain dollar amount to the commission, then why should we shortchange an official fiscal analysis and ask for less? Because then the onus falls on us for asking for less if the program ends up being chaotic later, right? So our job is to get a good, well-running program, and this is what we think it would take to announce to the world that Prince George's is ready to float a fair elections program.
Got it. And Commissioner Smith, you're saying a smaller dollar amount? I just want to make sure I'm understanding both of you.
No, I mean, I think it's fine. It probably makes sense to go back to the request we had, but I think I was just going to look up the letter, but didn't we? I think we said 2 million this year, and then it was less following. We were trying to front load
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So we could go back and visit that, and maybe, you know, the thing would be we could make as compelling an argument and case in our letter and send it to the you know, executive side, and then go through the conversation with them and they get feedback, because, you know, they're going to give feedback. And I just want to raise that, and this isn't my argument, but we're going to hear that we're having all these special election costs that are, you know, giving us challenges to fund. And so we've got all those. So it's going to be hard to ask for even more on top of that. We're going to hear that. And I think our case is that this is important for election reform, election integrity, and for building trust with the voters, and for the very purposes that the fund was created in the first place are on display, and let's make it happen. And that's how we're going to present and argue. But I do think this has been helpful, because I do realize that now we can, whether it's send the letter, but then see if we can get a briefing or discussion so we could really go back and forth. Because I think what I'm hearing from Suchitra is we do need to have advocates within the executive, because they're going to put together the supplemental and send it over. They have to believe in it. You know, they have to be able to make that case. And so we have to give them all the evidence and support and encouragement to make that case. And then we'll also do it in parallel. We'll be working to help the council prepare and be willing to give it a full consideration. But so, you know, I guess going back to our original letter and ask would be fine with me, but also that we're likely to have to come to that fallback position, which is the second letter we sent.
Yeah, I think we can. Oh, I think we can ask for the 2 million, and then to your point, the second letter that kind of we can talk it down. Which I think with Satitra, that's what you were saying. Essentially, that we haven't had any back and forth with anybody about, okay, this is the first letter, this was the first request, and then, hey, this is the second letter, this was the second request. We haven't had any conversation, any feedback. So I think that's what you're saying, but I don't want to misquote you. Go ahead. I see how your hand up.
Oh, I just want to say, I think it's our job to maintain the integrity of the program, right? And unlike the 2008 bill, when this was first passed, which was a very contentious discussion by the council and a 5-4 vote that got this program going, this council, just a few months before the budget in October 2023, voted 10-1 in support of this bill. And this executive signed it with this fiscal analysis, which mirrors the fiscal analysis from 2018. So I don't think we should be required to shortchange the program. We should be speaking up on behalf of the program and what it takes to run it. And I know all these millions and billions seem a lot, right? Because it's not something that comes into our household budget, and very few of us are running corporations. And so we don't deal with, at least I don't deal with numbers of this magnitude, and we say, well, what if? But clearly they're able to come up with 2.6 million for a special election. And as Dan pointed out, maybe subsequent special elections. So this is something that is supposed to lead to more community-driven candidates running for office and more candidates getting elected to office who are then accountable far more directly to the community than if your funding is not coming from the community. So we hope this will lead to more accountable governance, and our job is to advocate for that. And we should advocate for what it takes. And then, at some point, things are not in our hands anymore. But now it has come back into our hands after we thought we couldn't do anything more this budget cycle. And so maybe we should just go ahead with what we discuss and think is the best ask and make that, and then make that ask public, right? And say why it is that we have done this. And I think, because this is a program that has been sort of not been in the public eye for a long time. So as opposed to 2018 when it was passed, when at least activists around the county knew about it. So maybe again, we should be bringing that to people's attention. So anyway, so that's my sort of feeling at this point is it's not for us to shortchange the program, and let's do what we can to get a good program off the ground, the program that the analysts thought was the best way to run it. So I'll keep quiet now.
I mean, I'm fine with the request for $2 million initially in regards to the conversation with OMB. But it seemed like July is taking everybody because we got people dropping off the call. Like Bly's here. So I don't know if we have enough because it's just 4 commissioners on. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, okay, cool beans. We got Commissioner Nelson back. So Commissioner Nelson, just quickly, we were talking about the number that we wanted to initially present to OMB in regards to the request for the supplemental budget. Kind of settled on, but we're going to vote on it. $2 million to be the initial request to get feedback based on like what we feel like would be the best to run the program in regards to 2026. So at this time, do I have a motion to just approve that amount in regards to drafting a letter to or with OMB in regards to a request for supplemental budget? Okay. Commissioner Smith, I see you, but you're muted.
Yeah, I was just looking back at the January letter we sent, and we recommend the allocation of $2 million in FY 2025 with an added, then when added to the 400 already appropriated would an additional amount of 1.25 million in FY 26. So I just think our letter should just be consistent with this and just update and pass on so that the full amount is visible. And then so yeah, I would make a motion that we draft a letter consistent with our January 25th letter that asks for $2 million this year, and that letter be sent to the appropriate like chief administrative officer or appropriate executive staff leadership, and that we request a meeting or briefing to discuss this, or offer to meet with them, and then we would like to do that could say in September or something.
So there's a motion on the floor, but I feel like Ms. Nelson, Commissioner Nelson, raised her hand to ask a clarifying question before the motion. And since we don't have a second, let me get the clarifying question, and then you can repeat the motion.
I was about the original letter, but he brought it up, so I was going to ask about, because I remember 2 million, and then I was going to, so no additional question.
Okay, so then do we have a second? Okay, so then do we have a second to his motion, which would be, I'll just restate it, which would be to use the language from the second letter in regards to the, oh no, that wasn't, she was saying? First letter, I'm sorry, using the language from the first letter. And then in regards to drafting our letter for OMB, and then requesting to be able to present to the appropriate parties in regards to the county executive's office, as well as a request to present to the county council, preferably in September when they come back from their summer recess. Did I miss anything, Commissioner Dan? Might have.
I wasn't necessarily saying that to meet with the council in September, but
Okay.
I mean, I think the first order is really to meet with the
County executive.
yeah, but we need to have a parallel strategy, and so whenever we could
Okay.
yeah, so like in September or whenever, as soon as possible after that.
Do I have a
Well,
second for
we
that
can do it
motion?
sooner too. We don't know when we can meet, so, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the motion's about the letter.
Mm-hmm. Do I have a second?
Second,
I second.
We just lost another commissioner. All those in favor say aye.
I,
All right, and we will do that in context to the letter. We are at 7:04, and I try to be very honorable in context to the staff that's on. So I kind of wanted to touch briefly on outreach strategies and then just next steps. We have the document that I've shared with everybody in regards to dumping various organizations, contact information, and things of that nature, so that we can go out and start explaining to people who the Fair Election Commission is, what we exactly do, and things of that nature. As that, we'll have a whole month off, guys. I'm just requesting that you put in any information that you know as much as possible. I did make contacts over the past June weekend or so, because I went to Montgomery County's Pride, and they had like various, even though it was Montgomery County, they had statewide organizations that had Prince George's County chapters, and they kind of talked to me a little bit about just the connections from that perspective. So that's perfectly fine in regards to doing that. And then the other part about it is I did want to come back in September and we can have these conversations via email, but with firm dates on getting in front of some of these civic associations and regular and voter groups and things of that nature, kind of expressing who we are and what we do and why the fair elections is important, particularly in context to, just getting people on our side for the supplemental budget request. Next steps would be that we are going to draft the letter, and that'll be conversation via email. So please feel free to if you can jump on the meeting, things of that nature, and also give your feedback in the emails, and watch out for the emails to come out in context to that. Is there anything else?
well, Ms. Nelson's back. Perhaps we want to have her voice on the vote.
Yes, sure. We're gonna do the revote in regards to the actual the motion around sending the letter and getting in front of the county executive. Dan made the motion, Satitra seconded, so we will all those in favor of that vote as well. Aye.
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 All right, so we've got that. And so again, Ms. Nelson, I think you were on when I was talking about the outreach strategy and the kind of the next steps. And so with that being said, it is 7:07. You guys look amazing. Hopefully we can give you back part of your night, but just be mindful, we are going to be emailing for the next month or so. So while you guys are on a boat in Cabo, just check your email very quickly. I said, while y'all are on the boat in Cabo, I'll be here working. Just check your emails and get back to us as we move forward. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
We like being here.
Oh no, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, okay. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And And as we leave out, just thank you again to our staff, Attorney Maddox, Attorney Allen, Ms. Mortar Wiggins. Thank you guys so much for being on the call and providing your guidance, your assistance, and your support. A lot of the work that the commission does is greatly undergirded by what you provide us. So thank you again, and everyone have a good night.